Hey guys, welcome back to Post Series. Today I'm going to go over some of the steps you would take when you are attempting to stabilize some footage in Mocha. I have this footage here that's very unstable to say, and we want to stabilize this. So I'm going to bring that into Mocha so that I can track it. Now, one thing that I did want to mention is sometimes when we're tracking in Nuke, we use the high pass. I like to use the lablation. Any sort of filters or adjustments that you want to make to your plate so that you can get a better track. Any of those things that you apply in Nuke, you can also render them out and bring those into Mocha. All you need to do is make sure you have a solid alpha, and you can render this out and you can bring that right into Mocha. So actually, maybe, I think I rendered it already. Let me render it though, actually. I'm not sure. So after I go over the first plate in Mocha, maybe I'll show you guys how to bring this filtered image into Mocha, which it'll literally look just like this anyway. So let's just go over to, let's go to Mocha. So I brought in my plate. Now there are a few things that I wanted to mention. One, Mocha has a few different layouts. Sometimes when I open my Mocha, it's defaulted to this layout. I don't like this layout. I prefer the classic layout, but you do have a few other options. So however you want to view your footage in Mocha, and whichever way is easier for you to work, you have a few options on how to set that up. Mocha also has a brightness scaling here. So sometimes when you bring your footage in, it might come in very dark. So you can actually brighten that up right in Mocha. Since you don't have those gamma and gain sliders like you do in Nuke, you have this here that you can use in Mocha. One other thing that is good to note is on your clip tab here under the parameters, your pixel aspect ratio. Sometimes our footage is in a different pixel aspect ratio. It might be 1.8, and what'll happen is when you bring it into Mocha, it'll look all stretched or all weird, and you can just go ahead and adjust that to whichever. This plate is actually has a pixel aspect ratio of 1, so I could just leave that at 1. But if you are working in a different pixel aspect ratio, you can adjust that here in Mocha so that you can view your footage better for any changes that you need to make, especially when you need to roto and stuff. You know, you need to be viewing it the correct way. Another thing that you can do is you can change the color space of your footage as well here in the color space tab. So let's get to tracking this. So we will just go ahead and there are a few things there are a few key rules, or there's just some, we can say rules. There are some rules you want to follow when you are tracking in Mocha. You don't want to track anything that has a high reflection. So like this area here where the reflection is going to change as the shot is playing. We have some reflections here and some little hot spots there. The reflection in this window, of course, is moving the whole time. You have this reflection that's getting placed here on the tiles. So you don't want to include any reflective surfaces in your track. You also want to look around for lighting changes. You don't want to track anything where there's a shadow moving or the lighting is changing too much, because that will also affect your track. And generally for Mocha, it is a planar tracker, so you do want to track things that are on the same plane. You don't want to track something, let's say, on this wall, and then like something that's here or further in the foreground. You want things to kind of be on the same plane. So we are going to stabilize this. So for now, we'll just try to track some areas of this wall. I'll just look for pixels that I think Mocha will stick to. So edges are good. for tracking. Contrast is good. So I'll get some of this black edge of this clock. Um, let's go back to the first frame actually. I'm going to, if you create a keyframe, you can actually use these arrows here to toggle between keyframes. And I'm going to delete the one that I made because I want to make all of my initial keyframes on the first frame. So you have the timeline here, just like you have it in Nuke. You have this where you can create new keyframes, delete keyframes, and if you do have keyframes, you can toggle between those keyframes by clicking this arrow. So I'll delete those keyframes. These are for the tracking. These two track one frame forward and one frame back, and this will track all the way forward and all the way back. And then you have these controls here for your timeline. Go to the first frame or the last frame. Play your frames forwards, play them backwards, and move between 1 or 2 frames. And just like in Nuke, we see the frame. Let's watch this. We're on the first frame. So this shows us the first frame of our footage. This shows us the last frame. And this shows us which frame we're on. So it'll be moving as we're moving through the shot. You can also set frames. You can set in and out points just like you can in Nuke as well. So for now, we're not going to bother that. I am going to delete this and draw this over because I want to draw my first. I'm going to start at the first frame. There's no particular reason. I'm just deciding that that's the frame I want to start on. Now, when you are creating, Mocha is an offset tracker. So one good thing is while you're tracking, you can constantly add new shapes and delete old shapes. You must at least have one shape. You must keep one shape on. So I'm going to draw a few more shapes and then we'll go over that. But when you want to add a new shape, you just toggle down to the plus and then you can draw another shape. So I'll just get this edge here. Actually, I'll just stick to this little tiny amount. I don't need to go that far. So sometimes your track search area can be too big. You only need to make sure you're getting some high contrast and maybe some edges, something that'll be easier for the tracker to pick up on. Let's look at what I did here. So I have this blue in here. So I just have a little bit of blue. Then I'm keeping this little edge, this shape, because it's white and it's black. So the tracker will be able to stick to that area better. And also just grabbing this black edge. And then actually I'll go right over and get this window edge too, just to have the tracker something to stick to. And then there's this black line here. There's a black edge here, so I'll just bring this down too so the tracker can stick to that. So when you want to zoom in and out, you can hold down the Z key on your keyboard and then you can middle mouse to move up and down. Well, actually you right click and move up and down. If you start moving your middle mouse wheel, it'll actually start moving along the timeline. So you want to be careful that you're not thinking from other programs that you can use your middle mouse to zoom in and out, because you can't. You have to hold down the Z key while right clicking. Or you could also just go to the zoom tool here and then that'll activate it. So holding down the Z is a keyboard shortcut. Okay, so I have these two, and then I do want to find something over here to track. So let's see if I can find something that's unobstructed. So we have like a little, I might get this little bit of edge where the woman's hair is not going to be. So first, let's go back to the first frame that I was drawing on, and then yes, you do want to analyze your footage before even you start drawing your shapes, so that you can say, okay, maybe that's the good spot, but will it play throughout the whole shot? Now, again, since Mocha is an offset tracker, you really don't have to worry about it working the whole shot, because you can delete the shapes. So that's what I was talking about earlier. So for now, I'm going to draw this shape. I'm going to draw a shape here, although I know eventually her hand is going to go up and she's going to be in front of that shape. But I want to get as many good frames from this shape as I can, or just have this shape help my tracker for as many frames as it will work. And then I will show you guys how to offset track. Mostly I'll be changing this frame. So and I could also, okay, well actually maybe I'll add some more frames too as she starts moving. So for now, let's just start framing through. Now I want to go and find that frame that I know she starts going over. I want to see how long this area stays clear. So probably until about frame 33. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play forward, but when my track starts getting closer to frame 33, I'm going to stop it. Because with Mocha, there's no like in Nuke you can choose which frame you want to track forward to. In Mocha, you just have to stop it. So let's just go ahead and see. I'll look at my timeline. It's at like 20, and then now it's at 31. So now it's at 31. I know this is around the point where this particular shape is going to need to be changed. But what I can do is I can add a shape here. Now that I know this area is clean, so I can just have that help me. Now there's some highlights in here that I don't know if they're going to start changing because they're getting some light. So again, I don't want you want to avoid anything where these highlights or lighting changes are happening because it'll mess up your track. So I'll just stick with areas where I don't think any light is or reflections are affecting that area. And then I'll track one frame at a time because I want to make sure that I start, either you could start changing this shape to make it smaller, or you could delete it altogether and you could still keep tracking. I'm going to leave it there, and then I'll just finish tracking this through. Now I'll stop it, and I think at this point, let's see, does she go in front of that? Oh yeah, everything starts getting in the way. So at this point, I will actually delete that shape, and then I will finish my track. Now the problem is I feel like I need some pixels in this area because we only have this one shape up here. So let me see if we go back a few frames at a time. I might do an offset track for a few more frames. I could probably, now there's some reflection in here, but maybe Mocha will stick to, I don't know if her body's gonna come. Maybe Mocha will stick to these black pixels, but let's see. Okay, so I don't know about that one. Now what you can do, and what I like to do, is turn on this show planar grid. And what this will do is it'll actually let you know when your track is starting to not work. So when you first start tracking, you'll have this perfect rectangle. And if your track isn't working, this thing will start getting all skewed and like the shape will start changing. So let's see if that's happening to my track. Actually, most of the time I turn this on right when I start tracking. Now here, I think it might be following the perspective. So it's like right under the 5. Okay, so it's looking like it's still okay. Is it under the 5? Okay, let's watch this. And then once we get to this keyframe, is it moving? I think it's still working. And now we'll know, let's see if this, well, now that I added this shape here, I'll also pay attention to that and see if it's gonna start changing. So look like I can grab some of these good pixels, move this around a little more, try to have the tracker stick to this corner of the frame a little bit if I can. And then I'll have to play it back because and watch my pink grid, surface grid. Let's check. Okay, so now let's just play this and watch the surface grid. See if it's jumping or moving or getting bigger and smaller or popping. It'll do all those things when your track is not working. So that's a very good thing to turn on. Now I'll just label this one track. And then let's go over the process. I usually duplicate this one. And I always duplicate my initial track in the event that I want to just export out a Nuke tracker, just to have a tracker too. But mostly for stabilizing, I'm going to use a corner pin. So what I like to do, you want to go to the frame that you are, well, actually first I'll just label this. So I usually label my corner pin CP, and then if I'm going to do it on the first frame, I'll just label it CP start. If I'm going to do it on the last frame, I'll label it CP end. And if I'm going to adjust it on any other frame, I'll actually put the frame number in the name, like CP ref 25. Now, whichever frame you start lining this up, the reason that I try to name it so that when I bring it into Nuke, I know which frame is my reference frame. So we can turn this off for now, and we'll want to turn on this planar surface box. So it's just a little blue box here. And what this is going to be used for is we want to align this. So say I wanted to replace this window frame. I would actually align this box to the area of the plate that I want to replace, or I need the corner pin track for. And I guess I could just show you guys. And then I would export out a corner pin. So I know that this corner pin is going to work for my window. Now I'm just stabilizing this shot, so we'll use this window area. So if you want to see how this is lining up and you're having trouble lining it up, you can turn back on your grid, and then if you want to zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole grid, you can start seeing how everything is looking. So this can help you. You do want to be careful not to move your shapes, and instead you want to move the grid, the blue box, I should say. So yeah, we will line this up a little bit. I think this is fine. And yep, this looks good. So yeah, you just want to line that up. Now if you have lines to follow in the frame that you know are like literally parallel, I can't really use these black tile lines because of course this tile was placed there, so these lines might not really be parallel. Even the lines in the wall are just brick, but the line from the window we know should be parallel, so we can actually use that as a reference. And then we can use the frame as a reference because we know that that's probably more uniform to eyeball our lineup. And once you have it lined up, you can actually watch it play again if you want to see how it looks with the box in there. And we have, normally you would want to line it up on the clean frame. If you don't have any clean frames, that's when this grid comes in handy. And actually, I'll just leave what I had before. That seems to be fine. And then let's go back to our first frame. So if we want to export a corner pin, what you have to do is you do have to line you want to line your planar surface up first. And then what you're going to do is you are going to click on expand the planar surface. Now, what happens when you expand the planar surface, that is whatever frame you expand it on, whatever frame you're on when you expand it, that's going to be your corner pin reference frame in Nuke. So you want to be sure that you're expanding it on the frame that you want to be your actual reference frame. So after you analyzed your footage, you picked out which frame is the best, which frame is the clearest, which frame you want to place your object on, then you would expand it at that frame. Now again, I'm just stabilizing this footage, so I'm not replacing this window right now. So I'm just going to keep it at 1, and then I'm going to expand it. Now it's expanded, and now I can export it as a new corner pin, and then I can copy that to the clipboard. Then I go back to Nuke, and then I will paste that into my shot. And now let's take a look at that. Now what we want to do so that we turn this corner pin node into a stabilize is we want to invert it. So we want to just invert this, and that will turn our corner pin into a stabilize. And now let's just watch this play so we can see how well it worked. So there's some weird stuff going on with the window. And since there was a little parallax in this shot, there's a little motion blur type stuff happening in the back. But overall, now when you're stabilizing footage, again, you get these black edges, and what you have to do is you just have to transform, and you have to scale that up till you don't have any black edges anymore. Then you have to keep playing your shot through to make sure the edge doesn't sneak back in at some point. And then you probably want to add a crop right after that because the bounding box will get bigger. And now if we watch it play, it might not be so distracting to see what's happening. So let's look at how this is playing back. So this stabilized. Now the footage is stabilized, but this isn't going to work that well for. This is going to require a little more work. If we were going to use this in actual production, one, I would have this came from an MOV file. So of course, if I had the XR or a DPX, I would have more information. But we see what happens. I'll show you guys these frames. See, you have these one frames where like something gets blurry, it gets out of focus, then it goes back in focus. So that is not going to work. And let's look at our footage to see what's happening naturally in our footage during those frames. So that was the second frame. Oh, so we actually have this weird, it's the motion blur, but it looks worse when the footage is stabilized. So let's see. So yeah, when that motion blur is going to cause a problem, you have to go in and kind of clean up the shot. Now let me just try something. I don't know if it's going to work. Let's go into our corner pin, change the filter, and change the motion blur. We'll turn that on, and then maybe we'll turn this to centered. And now let's watch this play and see if that helped. No, it's not really going to help because that motion blur is just right there in this plate. So aside from the unfortunate motion blur that's happening, overall the plate is stabilized. This is just the natural motion blur that's occurring in this footage. I tried to find some footage that needed to be stabilized, but this was, as we saw, was very freehand. So there was, of course, unfortunately, it's going to be a lot of motion blur. Now, what you could also do, so once you have a general stabilize, what you might also have to do, we can tell there's some parallax because we can see how these objects here are moving a little bit too. So what you would have to do is you would then have to create some frame holds, and you would have to patch in these areas for the frames that are not working. So it'll be a little bit more work, and then it gets a little more involved. This was an extreme case though, I will say. Most of the time, I don't think that you will be getting any footage that's this shaky to stabilize. More likely, there'll just be a few bumps. So this is a very extreme case. Now, in this case again, if you were required to stabilize something that was that choppy, you would have to then go in and clean up this after you're stabilized. So now I have to go find all the frames that have a problem, and then I have to try to create some patches for the areas that I would have to create some patches for the areas that are a problem. And let's play this back in 8 frames. When I'm checking my tracks, I usually do like to switch my playback to 8 frames instead of 24. Then that helps me to see the problems better. So then at 8 frames, I could definitely figure out which frames need to be cleaned up. And then I would just go in there and clean up the areas where the problems are as most noticeable. And of course, you would want to ask your producer or anyone, let them know that it'll require more cleanup, and then ask them how far they want you to take the cleanup for those areas. But we do have a stabilized plate here. So that is stabilizing in Mocha and tracking in Mocha. A brief overview. There's a lot more tools here in Mocha that we didn't even get to. There's some other things you can do when tracking. So today I just wanted to show you guys how to stabilize footage. Maybe at some other point we'll start getting a little bit more into some of the tools that Mocha has.